A lot of interesting things here that I feel that the Lord has been sharing with me and putting in my heart. And this message that you're going to receive this evening is both for Christians and Jews alike. The first part here is going to be my own brethren, my Jewish brethren and sisters. And the second part of the message will be to the Christian people as well. It's very important that you listen closely, and let me just kind of update you if you're not aware of the news that is going on right now. The United States is becoming more and more with an ally with Iran, and Iran trying to make a covenant with them. They did not successfully make one today, but they're going to reconvene on the 20th of November. Their peace negotiations that they're trying to do in order to lift the sanctions on Iran, and at the same time Iran is rapidly moving towards moving their nuclear program forward. Iran released today some video footage of what it would be like with an attack with Israel. And how they would retaliate, showing vividly key points in Israel that they would attack and that they would blow up with a barrage of weapons. And to think that the United States is willing to negotiate with such a terrorist nation as Iran, and to think that this is going to bring peace in the region. I know Benjamin Netanyahu is grieved tremendously at the decision of the United States that they have been making. John Kerry also involved in these negotiations in the background. I've heard now that the Palestinians are trying to drill for oil, that Britain has agreed to help them to drill for oil in Judea and Samaria. So many critical things that are happening in the background as we speak here tonight. That is only just shaping the things that are going to take place. The time for the Gentiles is drawing to a close very rapidly, and I cannot stress to you enough the seriousness of the hour that we're living in. And so I want to get right into this, because this is going to be an insight for Israel, for my Jewish brethren, my rabbinical brethren. I invite you all tonight, and thank God that you're able to come and listen. These are things that are hidden in the prophets, in the prophet of Daniel, that we have overlooked. And at the same token, there is prophecies that are hidden in here as well that speak about what the church did itself after Israel. We got into the situation we got into over the last couple of thousand years. Now, let's go to Daniel chapter 4 is where I'd like to begin at. And I'm just going to kind of read along here, and I'm going to kind of just start showing you the things that God has revealed to my heart here. This is about King Nebuchadnezzar, and he's had a dream upon his bed. He is troubled at it, and he begins to call the Chaldeans and the astrologers, the magicians, to try to interpret this dream. So let's look at this real quickly. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore I made a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babel before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then came the magicians and the conjurers and the Chaldeans and the astrologers, and I told the dream before them, but they could not make known to me the interpretation. But at the last Daniel came in before me, whose name is Belshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom the spirit of the holy gods is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret is too difficult for thee. Tell me the vision of the dream that I have seen. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you up front, straight out, Nebuchadnezzar's dream is a type of Israel and what happened to Israel, Israel going into captivity and Israel being restored again. And here, there's just all kinds of beautiful little insights here that let us know this. Let's jump down just a little bit, because I don't want to read everything. You can go ahead and read the whole story for yourself again and see this. But let's drop down to around verse, verse 7. And keep in mind, now I do realize, I believe that the Christian Bible is a little different here than what I have in the Tanakh. It may be 2 or 3 verses off, so if it's not the right verse for you, forgive me. It'll still have the same meaning, and you'll find the same passage, but maybe a verse or 2 off in the Christian Bible. Verse 7, thus were the visions of my head as I lay on my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and was strong, and its top reached to the sky, and it was visible to the end of all the earth. Its leaves were fair, and its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. And the beasts of the field had shade under it, and the birds of the sky dwelt in its boughs, and all the flesh was fed from it. I saw the sky, and I saw in the vision of my head as I lay upon my bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came from heaven. He cried aloud and said, thus hewn down the tree and cut off its branches and shake off its leaves. We find in the Christian Bible in Romans chapter 11, now in this particular, in the parable there that Paul speaks about, we have an olive tree, which is not like this tree as far as the similitude. This tree here is talking about the greatness of the size. But the whole point is, though, is still the similitude of it. In the natural olive tree, God cuts the branches out because of unbelief. But the root of the tree is never destroyed. The purpose that God is showing here in Nebuchadnezzar's dream here about this tree, that its branches have just reached out to heaven, is because Israel as a nation has blessed the entire world. And it can be seen from everywhere. Because of God being with Israel, the world was blessed by Israel and by the greatness that God had done in Israel. But then the time comes that when a Holy One would come among Israel, and Israel would reject that Holy One, and because of the rejection of Mashiach when he came, God cut out the branches of the tree and left nothing but a root and a stump was left over. Now, I find it ironic that the magicians, the astrologers, the wise men, as Daniel calls it, these were the wise men that came that could not reveal to Nebuchadnezzar. They could not reveal to him the mystery of this vision. Now, when the wise men came looking for Mashiach, because they knew from the signs of the heavens that the Messiah was to come. And by the way, right here in Daniel's time, it's from the same region of the earth. The wise men came from the same place that Daniel was at. It's just a beautiful story here. The same wise men that came and could not interpret Daniel's vision were the same wise men that came when Jesus, Yeshua, was born on the earth, and he was about 2 years old, and the wise men came looking and said, where is he born King of the Jews? But the reason why I say the type is there, you have to keep in mind, why is this type here? It's because when the wise men came in, and Herod knew of this, he asked him, he said, go tell me where he's at and bring word to me again. But they were warned of God. And they left the country another way. The revelation of what they had come for could not be revealed to Herod because God would not make it known. Same way here. Nebuchadnezzar could not get the revelation of who or what his dream was from the wise man. So the Holy One that Nebuchadnezzar sees here, he says here, and he cried aloud and said, thus hewn down. See, watch, a watcher and a Holy One came down from heaven. What did Yeshua say? I come from God. I go back to God. the Son of Man, which is in heaven. And yet he was on earth. There's so many things that can be said. Now, let me just share with you something, though, here about this wise man to bring out another prophecy. In Isaiah, Yeshayahu 29, we read here, verse 14, "Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people." Who? Israel. "Even a marvelous work and a wonder, for the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid." The rabbis, it was hidden from them. The wise men, I mean, do you see what this is incredible, what God has hidden here? Right before our eyes, it's hidden about the coming of Mashiach in a way that we've never considered before. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps there has been some scholar out here that has saw this with Nebuchadnezzar, but I personally am not aware of it. And maybe God has dealt with you and showed you this as well, the similarities here. Now, here's what's interesting, though. It gets better. It's not just there. It's not just the wise man. It's not just the Holy One that comes. Watch what happens here. "He cried aloud and said thus, hewn down the tree and cut off its branches, shake off its leaves and scatter its fruit." Oh, do you not know that Yeshua did that while he was here? Yeshua gave us a sign. When he came, remember we read in the Christian text, I'll tell you where it's at, and you can look it up for yourself. Matthew 21:19, I made myself a note about this. He comes down and the fig tree doesn't have any fruit on it. And he was hungry. And so he curses the tree. And he said, "Let it bring forth no more forever." And then later they came back and his disciples marveled how soon the tree doth wither. Here it is. He was showing Israel again, see Yeshua, he does things, he says things that should have made us realize who he is. Maybe not back then, but now. It's even like his disciples. So many things he said to them when he was on earth, and they didn't get it. Like he said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up again." After he died and raised from the dead, then they realized he wasn't talking about the building. He wasn't talking about the natural temple. He was talking about his body. They got it after the fact. Now we're here 2,000 years later. It's after the fact. Now we're starting to see things again like the disciples did that are starting to make sense to us. So he says, hewn down the tree and cut off its branches and shake off the leaves. Well, in this case here, he come and curse the tree and it happened anyway. Just like Paul said in Romans 11. The branches were cut off because of unbelief. But the stump still lived. "Let the beast flee from under it, and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, and in the band of iron and brass, amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast in the grass." And this is what he's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. This is what's going to happen to Nebuchadnezzar. This is what happens to Israel. You see, the thing is, we find out because he got lifted up. He got lifted up in pride. And he couldn't recognize. He forgot that God was still God and ruled in the affairs of men. That in itself. When Yeshua came to the earth, he was God in a human body, ruling in the affairs of men. And Nebuchadnezzar failed to recognize that God was in his midst. So God says He's going to cause him the tender grass of the field. Let him be with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast of the grass of the earth. Let his portion be with the beast in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from a man's, and let the beast's heart be given to him. And let 7 seasons pass over him. By the way, that's not 7 years. I know I think in Strong's they translate that as a time, but they also translate it as a year. There's another place in the Hebrew where we use this word here. Adin is the word in Hebrew. And it's a season. It can there's different times that it can be applied to, and I'm not sure. I can't say for sure how long this season is or this time space is, but there's 7 seasons in there. Now I just took it in my own thinking as seasons like fall, spring, winter, etc. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's so. We don't know for sure how long that season is. It could be 30 days, because there is another place in Scripture where where that word is used and it's likened to 30 days, but there's other places that make it seem longer. So we don't know for sure exactly how long that season is. But the reason why I believe it's 7 seasons, as it should be translated, or 7 times, I think is the way the King James translates that, is because it's not years. And the reason why we know it's not years is because that 7 seasons or 7 times is hermeneutically the same type of the 7 churches of Revelation that spans or hermeneutically types the church that would come down through the next 2,000 years. And it's not hermeneutically with that particular issue there, as far, in other words, the 7 church ages, as some people refer to it, it is 7 seasons, and that's what happens with those 7 churches there. The seasons in which, or the times in which those churches evolved over the last 2,000 years had different time spaces and spans, and as far as whatever typed the type of the church. For example, we have the Church of Laodicea, the 7th church that is in Asia Minor. And the spirit of that church is a type of the church today. They're lukewarm. They're not cold. They're not hot. And because of it, God spews them out of His mouth. But now the ironic part of this, let's say that it were to be 7 seasons, as far as like in spring, summer, winter, and fall. That would be equivalent to nearly 2 years of time that Nebuchadnezzar was in this condition. And then if we look at a year being 1,000 years, it's 2,000 years that the church actually has come down through time, or nearly 2,000 years, because we got to remember it was nearly 100 years into that before that happened. Just a little thought there just to throw in there to you. I just thought it was interesting that the two seem to correspond one with the other. But anyway, so let's go on past that there. So he takes that heart of the beast, and Israel for the last 2,000 years. And I do not mean this in any disregard to my brethren, because you have to understand, my own family, we have been, for the same way. My mother's side, it was being Jewish down through the ages there, the same way, never knowing who the Messiah was. It's the beast side of it represents the carnality, not having that spiritual connection with God the way God intended us to have. And with Nebuchadnezzar, God humbled him in order to get his attention. With Israel, the same thing has happened to us. And now, the house of Judah has only been scattered for 2,000 years. The house of Israel, we've been scattered for 2,700 years. And it's during this time that God has humbled us, but yet as a nation at one time, we totally affected the entire world. When God had exalted us to such a place to where the world knew that Israel was a mighty nation of God. Now, God is once again beginning to graft us back, beginning to bring that root back to light, as he did with Nebuchadnezzar as well. Now notice, in verse 15 we'll say, "Now thou, king, this dream I king Nebuchadnezzar..." Oh, wait a minute. Oh, my apology. I'm in the wrong spot there. So as we see, the king has departed from the... Okay, now here's what's interesting. And at the end of the 12 months, he was walking in the palace. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Back up a little bit more. Let me go back to verse 23. "Thy kingdom shall be sure for thee, after thou shalt come to know that the heavens do rule." That's very important. And that's what God was doing with Israel. To make Israel recognize that God is over everything and in control of everything. "Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to thee, and break off thy sins by charity, and thy iniquities by showing mercy to the poor." And that's interesting, because Israel has been known for doing both. Works. To try to appease the anger of God. So many types here, it's just unbelievable. "And break off thy sins by charity, and thy iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. And there may be an extension of thy tranquility." And all this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. And at the end of 12 months, he was walking in the palace of the kingdom of Babel. The king spoke and said, "Is not this great Babel?" Or Babel, I think is how you have it in the English Bible, I'm sorry. "And I have built by my might of my power as a royal residence. And for the honor of my majesty, while the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee." My brothers, my rabbinical brother, my brothers and sisters of Jewish birth living in Israel and abroad and around the world, when this man Yeshua was on the scene, go back and read the documentation. We were so lifted up that God was with us. And who was this man called Yeshua coming and declare himself someone? And notice, Nebuchadnezzar was not cut down at the time of the interpretation of the dream. It was a year later. And neither was Israel when Yeshua was crucified. Nothing happened to us at first. 40 years later, though, judgment fell upon our nation. And we were scattered to all the earth. Now, I say that. Let's go a little further. The kingdom is departed from thee, and thou shalt be driven from men, and dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. Thou shalt be made to eat grass like an oxen. I tell you what, many of these things actually happened to our own people. Especially during the times we had to run and live in the wilderness and things of that nature. That's about to happen to the Christian people. The true Christian people, especially those that... Let me just say this to my Christian brothers and sisters. You need to get your life in order. You need to, if you're not saved and you're listening to this video, you need to recognize that Yeshua, that Jesus is indeed the Messiah. You need Him as your Savior. You need to accept Him as your Savior. You need to repent and you need to cry out to Him. The gospel of Yeshua is about to turn back to the Jews. When it does, He will leave the mercy seat to make Himself known to His brethren, to His people. When He does that, there is no one to make intercession upon your confession. It'll be too late. The hour is now for you to recognize that Jesus is the Messiah. Do not put it off another moment. Because we're fixing to come now to see what's happening to the church. Let me go further, a little bit further though. The 7 seasons shall pass over thee, and in order that thou mayest know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men. See, it has to happen so that they know. So those 7 church ages, as Chuck Missler says, has to be fulfilled. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men and did eat grass of the oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, so his hair was grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to heaven, and mine understanding returned to me. Soon Israel will recognize the revelation of who Moshiach is. In one day, God said to the prophet Zechariah, thou hast done this. And Israel will be born, a nation, in one day. Her understanding of who Moshiach is will be in one day. I bless the Most High. I praised and honored him who lives forever. Did you notice? He no longer is serving gods. He says, I bless the Most High, and I praised and honored him who lives forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he does according to his will in the most of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, what doest thou? And the same time my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me, and my counselors and my lords sought to me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth and his ways justice, and he is able to abase those who walk in pride. This will be when Yeshua is revealed to Israel. They will recognize him, and they will say, where did you get these wounds? And he said, in the house of my friends. Man, what a day is about to strike the world. You have no idea. He will recognize that he is the God of heaven and he is the Most High. We're going to get into that message very soon too. The identity of Mashiach. I've had a lot of you ask me about it. It is coming. It is coming. Brother Jason, you really asked a lot. It is coming, my brother. It's coming. Now, here's another one here. Now we go on into the church, and it's very important if you are a Christian that you hear this. It is important because this is a very serious issue. You must understand. If you are Catholic and listening to this message, you above all people need to listen to this. It is important that you hear this and that you recognize the next words that are coming upon you here. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords. Now this is Nebuchadnezzar's son, not Daniel, where he's called Belshazzar. This is Belshazzar. Very similar name, but it's not the same. It is the son of King Nebuchadnezzar. Remember, the Vatican, the Catholic Church believes that they take the place of Israel, the replacement theologists. This is the replacement theologists. They believe to be the sons of Israel. Yes, they are. In a type they are. And especially in this case. The king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem. I can only imagine what's about to take place. You know, the Vatican, when Roman, the Titus general, had gone down and taken the golden vessels from the temple and took them back to Rome, now the Vatican has control of that. I wonder if they're not going to use the golden cup that was there as part of the dedicational ceremony. As they go to help restore the third temple, as they go to try to make this peace agreement, they will bring out these golden treasures that were stolen by Titus, that the Vatican now has control of. Now notice what God says here. They bring them out at the time of Belshazzar's son. And the Vatican, the Catholic Church, is the son of Belshazzar as far as a type of the son of Israel. Okay? Or type of Nebuchadnezzar's son. And had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Every one of these denominational systems are going to get involved in this. Why? Because you married into the Vatican. You got your World Council of Churches. Your communical movement. They might drink from them, that they might brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which is at Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines. You know, I don't care if you're a denominational system or not. Concubine, you're just a common law wife to it. Anyone that joins up to this Vatican, anyone that joins up to this peace process, I don't care if you're Christian, I don't care if you're Muslim, I don't care if you're what you are. You could be Hindu for all that matters. You get involved in this peace accord that's going on, this curse is coming on you. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver and of brass and of iron, of wood and stone. In the same hour the finger of a man's hand appeared and wrote against the lampstand upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. And then the king's color changed, and his thoughts terrified him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Yes, sir. Judgment is coming on. That great prostitute. I've gotten several videos in from people that they say that prostitutes Mecca and all of that. Sure. That's a prostitute too. They're married into the Vatican. I guess for those of you who don't know, in 2010, July of 2010, that's when the Arab League joined with the Vatican and made an alliance with one another. There's one of your concubines. How do people miss it? I don't know, God. His knees smote one against the other. The king cried aloud to bring the conjurers, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers, and the king spoke and said to the wise men of Babel, whoever shall read this writing and declare to me the meaning of it shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and the rule and his third in the king will be third in the kingdom. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing nor make known to the king the meaning of it. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet's house. The queen spoke and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts affright thee, nor let thy color change. There is a man in thy kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. You know what's funny is they don't learn nothing, do they? Here, Belshazzar here is the son of Nebuchadnezzar. When Nebuchadnezzar, he saw the holy gods in Daniel as well. But notice what he did when he recognized that God was the supreme one. He no longer served other gods. There was no Elohim as far as the plural. In Hebrew, we use that also to represent other gods. Okay? There was no multiple gods in Nebuchadnezzar's testimony after God humbled him. But unfortunately, they didn't learn anything from Daddy. Neither has the church learned anything from Israel. In the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, in whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made chief of the magicians and conjurers and Chaldeans and astrologers, seeing that an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding to interpret dreams and explain riddles and solve problems were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will declare the interpretation. Then was Daniel brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Art thou Daniel, who art the children of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Judah? I have heard of thee, and the spirit of the gods in thee, and the light of understanding, excellent wisdom is found in thee, and the wise men, the conjurers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known its meaning, but they could not declare the interpretation of the thing. I have heard of thee. Thou canst give the interpretations and solve problems. Now if thou can read the writing and make known to me the interpretation of it, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and rule as a third in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writings to the king. You know why he didn't want their rewards? He knew what God was going to do to them. I don't want nothing to do with it. I don't want their money, I don't want their gold, and I don't want their silver. Because God is going to destroy that Vatikan. Moving on down. Yet I will read the writing of the king and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and greatness and glory and majesty, because of the majesty that they have that he gave him. All peoples and nations and tongues trembled and feared before him. That's Israel again, going back to Israel. Whom he would slew, and whom he would keep alive, and whom he would set up, and whom he would put down. But when his heart was lifted up, his mind hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. And he was driven from the sons of men. And his heart was made like the beast, and the dwelling was with the wild asses. He was fed with grass like oxen, and his body wet with dew of heaven. Church, have you not learned anything from what happened to Israel? Until he came to know that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and appoints over it whomever he pleases. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thy heart, though thou knowest all this. Mr. Pope Francis, do you not realize you have had an example of what God did with Israel? And yet, you had all of this for your example. And what have you done? Hast thou not humbled thy heart, thou that knowest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven? That is Yahweh, the God of heaven. And they have brought the vessels of his house before thee. And thou and thy lords, thy wives and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold and brass, iron and wood. No wonder why the Vatican wants to rule the world and take control of the commerce of this world. The very one that has all the articles of the Second Temple, which do not see, hear, or know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, whose are thy ways, thou hast not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written, and this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, takil, afasin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God has numbered thy kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balance and are found wanting. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to Mede and Perez, the Medes and the Persians. You have come to divide the land of Israel. Using your little John Kerry, your little Barack Obama, but you've come to divide our land. Now God will divide you. He will divide the United States. Unfortunately, Christian friends, let me just say this to you in closing. When Israel went into captivity, the righteous and the unrighteous went alike. There is an escape for the bride that will escape this judgment of God. But to the rest of the world, there is no escape. There will be many Christians that go into tribulation. You're saved, you love the Lord Jesus, but you've been playing games with Him. That is, I hate to say it this way, but those are the types of Peter. Peter loved the Lord Jesus and said he was willing to die for Him, but denied Him 3 times. But he does die later. That's where a lot of confusion comes in about the rapture, and different people having the idea, well, the rapture happens at the beginning, the rapture happens at the end, and different thoughts. And that's not something I'm going to get into the debate with here. But it's 2 different groups of people. There's going to be a little remnant that's just going to disappear. There's your Enoch group. But then there's that group of Christians, the majority of them. 8 times greater if you look at the numerology of Enoch and Noah. Enoch was translated and escaped the judgments altogether. Noah and his family went through the judgments. They were delivered, though. It's a serious hour. I want to take, just in closing, I want to thank you. I want to thank those of you that have come forward to support this ministry, that believe that God is behind this. I thank you for that. If you feel in your heart to be a part of this ministry, to support this ministry, we thank you. And that does not just have to be financial. I've had different people write me and ask me about what can we do to help. Anything and everything is wonderful. There are those that support us financially. There's those that don't have those means. Your prayers, I cannot tell you how much I covet your prayers. You want to do something for me? Pray for me. Pray for my family, that God will lead us what to do, where to go. We're wanting to relocate the ministry away from South Florida because I don't think this is a safe place. But we want to continue to broadcast and to get the message out to the people. We want to see everything we can to do to help you as we near the end here. But what we need is your help and support as we prepare the gospel. And perhaps this ministry is just planting the seeds for the Jewish people to recognize who the Messiah is, so that when He sends us 2 witnesses, they'll believe it then. I don't know what God has in mind here, but be a part. Help us to do all we can to get the gospel out. There's quite a few messages that I want to put out. We still are looking for translators as well. I've had several of you contact me in the past. We had one sister translate a Spanish message. If you've got a talent that we're not aware of, let us know. If you're able to help, we'd love to have your help as well. But if you want to give to the ministry online, IsraelReturns.com, www.israelreturns.com. You can give that way, or if you want to do it by mail, either way. I've had people call me up and tell me, Brother Steve, I got X number. You just say the word, I'd give every bit of it to you. I said, I can't do that. I don't believe that God works that way either. I thank the person for being kind enough to be willing to do that. I said, to me, that's not right of me to say that. If God leads in your heart to want to contribute, then let God lead you how He so chooses. I'm not going to say a word like that. That would not be right of me to do that. God knows what we have need of. He knows what we have need of to get out what He is intending to get out and how He wants to get it out. If you want to be a part of that, we thank God for you. Pray about it and see how He leads you. I don't want to influence anything. God works on both sides. He'll deal with your heart. I only say this to you because if I don't tell you, then you wouldn't have any idea. But I love you. Our family loves you. We thank you for all that you're doing. Pray for Israel. It's a critical time. That's one thing I beg you to do. As the Esthers of the bride of Christ, be in prayer for Israel continually. And don't worry about the way the Jews look outwardly. He's getting ready to move them into a place to recognize him. You're going to be shocked when you see those Jews that believe that he's the Messiah. God bless you and good night.